Hey, nerds. So, going to talk about Robert Wright and his basically agnostic perspective, but he almost sounds like an atheist, and he explains that he was formerly a particular type of Christian, and he basically outlines the argument in his own words that feeling like someone is watching us all the time or a sense of guilt is proof of the existence of God, which sounds like a weak argument, but the way he outlines it and the way he talks about this with the theologian makes it sound kind of interesting. And obviously, it's ironic coming from an agnostic, an argument for God.
Let me ask you about a
Why is the sound coming through there? Oh, well.
feature of my interior life that I've only mentioned it a couple of times to people, and they were always kind of secular atheists, more or less. And I was surprised by how surprised they were about it. And the way I describe it is this. So I grew up religiously, Southern Baptist, assuming that there was a God and having a sense of the presence of God. And I lost my specifically Christian faith. But what I say is I still feel that my conscience is kind of something outside of me. In other words, I have the sense that I'm being judged. And I think it's possible to think of that as just the way my conscience manifests itself, right? Do you identify with that sense, or is it going to turn out that I'm actually more religious than you? That would be weird.
I mean, this is one of the arguments for the existence of God, is that lots of people have a sense like you described, that there's some being outside them. Maybe it's judging them, maybe it's speaking to them, maybe, whatever form it takes. And that, this is what you would expect in a world where God exists. And okay, not everyone has this sense, but it's enough of a human universal that we should believe in God. Yeah, I don't think that's a slam dunk argument, but it is an argument.
Yeah, that is an argument. It's a well-formulated argument, but it doesn't necessarily mean that God exists. I mean, you can say that many people have this sense of being watched, like they were talking about, right? And many theologians have talked about this throughout hundreds of years of human history, obviously. But if this is like some universally recognized feeling that people have, then that's what people can use to justify God. It's like this intuition that people have, which obviously you can't prove or disprove. So it's not a very good argument, but it is an argument. But I think the point of this, and makes it interesting for me, is that not exactly an atheist, but more of an agnostic who used to be a Christian, Robert Wright, who's one of my favorite authors, and he does lots of podcasts, that he's making an argument for God. And he's written some interesting books, by the way, called one is called Why Buddhism is True, which is his kind of argument for Western secular Buddhism, however you want to define that. And also The Evolution of God, which is about basically him talking about, according to his research, the fact that God, the monotheistic Christian God, was originally like a primitive warrior God. And then there was kind of polytheism originally in Christians, like thou shalt worship no other God before me, but you can also still worship other gods. So it was understood for a while at first that people would worship other gods, but they would also worship the Christian gods. And then it gradually transformed through that. So he talks about the evolution of the conception of God in Christianity throughout human history, which I think is really interesting. But anyway, yeah, like I said, the point of this that makes this really interesting for me is that not exactly an atheist, but an agnostic is telling his perspective for what he thinks to be a good argument for God. Now, it's not a very good argument, but it is a very good argument. Does guilt prove the existence of God? It's a good question, but no, guilt does not prove the existence of God.